This is an absolute keeper for me, and honestly, it may be my favorite game I've gotten to know this year so far. Hey everyone, this is Thecos. Today I want to give you my review for Tomb Raider, the Crypt of Chronos. I've already published a playthrough of the game on the channel, so if you haven't watched that yet and you want to get a better feeling for how the game actually plays, I highly suggest checking that out as well. I will give you a little bit of footage from that playthrough while I talk about the game today. In this video, I won't go through all the rules in detail. Instead, I want to give you my full review and talk about what I like about the game, what I don't like as much, and why this one surprised me so much. And honestly, the reason I wanted to make a dedicated review for Tomb Raider the Crypt of Chronos is quite simple. I like this game a lot, and this may be so far my game of the year 2026. So before we get started, as usual, grab yourself a cup of tea and let's do this. Alright, there we go. Just to quickly frame the game. Tomb Raider the Crypt of Chronos is a pure solo campaign adventure game. You play as Lara, move through scenario-based maps, complete objectives, deal with enemies, collect resources, craft equipment, and try to survive the campaign. It's not a huge dungeon crawler with dozens of characters, long setup, and tons of upkeep. It is much more streamlined than that. Each chapter is fairly quick, usually around 30 minutes for me, and the game focuses on tactical decisions, dice allocation, crafting, movement, stealth, combat, and adapting your loadout to the situation. First of all, I have to say that I really enjoy this game. On the surface, it may look like a fairly standard dungeon crawler or campaign adventure game. You set up map tiles according to the scenario, you have a specific objective, you move around, defeat enemies, interact with things on the map, and try to complete the chapter. But once you actually play it, Tomb Raider, the Crypt of Chronos, has a lot of its own ideas. What I really appreciate is how streamlined it feels compared to many other campaign or scenario-based games. The setup is surprisingly quick. For a game of this kind, it doesn't take up that much table space. You have the 16 map tiles, which are not very large. Then you have the Lara board, the crafting bench, a few cards and dice, and some tokens in this bag here. That is basically it. For recording a video, of course, it still takes up space, but for normal play, this is very manageable. The insert here already also helps a lot. It's not perfect, but it's very well designed overall. It keeps the game organized, and once you know how the game is set up, it really helps you get everything to the table quickly. At this point, setup usually takes me around 5 minutes, which is absolutely great for this type of game. There are a few small things I would have liked to see. For example, a little removable token tray for these small tokens here would have been nice. So it's something you can just take out of the box and place on the table. I also would have liked to store the resource tokens here directly in the bag inside the box, instead of taking them out and putting them back and every time. But honestly, those are nitpicks. There are not that many tokens here in the game, as you can see, and getting them ready is still quick and easy. Teardown is also very manageable, and I really like the save system, especially if you print out the campaign sheet to record your current status. It works very well. You can then store your campaign progress clearly, put everything away, and continue later without much hassle. And I also like the save box itself, which looks like Lara's classic backpack. That is such a nice detail, and it also works really well in practice. The box is also relatively small for everything that's contained here. It's pretty much like standard size, it's just a little bit deeper. And I really appreciate that a lot. A lot of campaign games come in huge boxes and take forever to organize, set up, and tear down. This one feels much more practical, and that makes a big difference in how often I actually want to play it. I finished the entire campaign of 15 scenarios within 2 to 2.5 weeks. That's pretty impressive. The rulebook is also really good. It has a clear structure, it explains the game well, and for the most part I found it easy to learn the system from it. I also really like the glossary here at the back of the rulebook. During my playthrough, whenever I needed to look something up, I found the term there. And because it is right at the back, you don't even have to search through the whole book first to find the right page. That is very useful. There were a few edge cases, especially around enemy movement, where I was not always 100% sure of how to resolve them. But this is a solo game, so ultimately I found a way that worked for me, stayed consistent with it, and moved on. It's not a big issue for me. What I don't like about the rulebook is its size. It is a huge square rulebook, basically the size of the box, and I strongly dislike large rulebooks like that. Maybe that sounds like a nitpick, but I just don't find it practical. It takes up too much space on the table, and I would have much preferred a smaller rulebook that is easier to handle during play. And yes, that is possible. because the campaign book is as large and doesn't need to be. Look at the Croft Manor expansion. This one is a campaign book as well, and you have everything here in a small rulebook. You don't need more. That's all you need. It's like still large enough to read. It's totally fine. So even the large rulebook could have been in such a small format. No issue whatsoever. So that's like one thing that I really did not enjoy. Yes, I know this is not a huge thing for many people, but for me it is, because it does distract from the learning experience of the game. All right, back to all the positives that I have. The theme comes across really well. You really feel like Lara. And to me, it feels like a combination of classic Lara and the newer Lara from the Survivor trilogy. You can ravage through levels with your weapons, you have outfits from across the entire series, and that gives the game a lot of Tomb Raider flavor. But you can also craft, play more carefully, use stealth, and rely on the bow, which feels much closer to the newer games. At the same time, the game is not 100% thematic in every small rule. For example, the line of sight rules for enemies don't feel completely thematic to me. But I'm actually fine with that, because the reason they feel less thematic is that they are very simple. They are easy to remember, easy to apply, and they make the game flow really well. And for me, gameplay always takes precedence over theme. I love a good theme, of course, but ease of play, streamlining, and fun are much more important. So even if a few rules are not perfectly thematic, they make the game smoother and easier to play, and I think that was the right decision here. Gameplay-wise, one of my most favorite elements is the crafting bench. I think this is a really cool idea. You don't really level up in a traditional way, but you can constantly adjust your loadout by crafting weapons, outfits, abilities, temporary dice, health, ammo, and other useful things. That means your character can adapt during the scenario and you can react to whatever you need to at that moment. And that feels very thematic, especially if you know the newer Tomb Raider games, particularly the Survivor trilogy, where crafting and adapting your equipment are such a big part of the experience. I think the board game captures that really well. There's one thing about the crafting system that I don't find perfect though. Normally you have 2 weapon slots and 1 outfit slot. If you craft a new weapon or outfit and you want to keep it, you have to discard one of the old ones. You might see that card later again, but you also might not, and for me that feels a little too restrictive. There is a house rule, where you keep everything you have crafted, and then at the beginning of a mission you decide to load out. I actually play with that rule now because I think it fits the game better. This way you can look at the mission, think about what the level asks of you, and then choose your equipment accordingly. Honestly, I think this should have been part of the official game. It makes the loadout system feel much more satisfying and more thematic to me. Apart from that small criticism, I love the crafting system. The outfits are especially fun for Tomb Raider fans. There are so many outfits from across the entire series, and while they give you gameplay effects, they also are just full of nostalgia. You have outfits from the original games, from the Survivor trilogy, from Tomb Raider Legend, Angel of Darkness, and so on. That attention to detail is really cool. The same is true for weapons. They feel different from one another. Some are silent, some have more range, some work better at close range, and others are better from far away. Some have an area of effect damage. So changing your loadout is not just cosmetic, it really changes how you approach a scenario, especially if you play with that house rule I just mentioned. One thing connected to crafting that I don't love though is the bag. It looks nice, and I like that it has the game logo on it, but it is simply too small. You reach into the bag a lot because you gain crafting materials, spend them, put them back, and draw again. And in some chapters, you may use the bag 10 or 15 times or even more. And because the bag is so small, it's hard to properly mix the tokens, especially if you have larger hands. If you put all the tokens that exist in the bag, it's pretty much like full up under here, and you can hardly like mix those tokens anymore. This doesn't hurt the quality of the gameplay, but it is a nuisance, and I may actually replace this one with a larger bag in the future. But there is also one thing I really appreciate about the game. It lets you shape your version of Lara during the campaign, but without making the game overly complicated. You gain more options, you make choices about your equipment and abilities, but it stays manageable. The research system is also a nice touch because it allows you to gain more cards, more things they can use, one-time abilities, over time. And those one-time abilities give you a sense of progression without turning the game into a heavy character building campaign. What I also enjoy a lot is how the game uses the dice. In its basic form, the system is not completely new. You assign dice to actions, roll them, and then resolve what happens. But what makes it clever is that all actions use the same general idea while still feeling different from one another. Some actions punish you if you only roll blanks, so you may want to assign more dice to make that less likely. Other actions like research still give you progress even if you don't roll particularly well. Some actions can only be done once per Lara phase. So you have to time them carefully. And then there is the dodge action, which I think is really smart. You don't have to reserve dice in advance just in case you might need to dodge during the enemy turn. Instead, if you dodge, you can use dice for that. But those dice won't be available on your next turn. So it still creates a risk-reward decision, but without forcing you to hold back dice that you might not need and could have used during your turn. I think this is a very elegant solution. So even though the action system looks simple at first, there's a lot of going on here. You constantly decide of how much you want to commit, how much risk you want to take, and whether you want to play aggressively, carefully, or more stealthily. And that is something I really like. This game can be quite action-packed, but it can also be very stealthy if you want it to be. You can rush in, fight enemies, craft weapons, and deal with the situation directly. But you can also try to move carefully, avoid making noise, and play around enemy movement. That flexibility is great. I love this. I also really like the Lara board. Everything you need is right here. And it's compact and easy to oversee. The way the weapons, outfits, and abilities, health, and other elements are organized works really well. There is also a lot of love for the Tomb Raider license here. You can get 2 different Lara miniatures. Let me just show them to you. Right here, for example. The newer model, and then you also have like an old model of the classic games. But also you get different versions of the Lara board. It doesn't change anything gameplay-wise, of course, but it is a really nice detail. If you prefer the more modern Lara, like I do, you can use that. If you prefer the more classic Lara, well, that option is there as well. In terms of content and replayability, there is a lot here. I have now played through the entire main campaign, and the core gameplay loop works really well for me from beginning to end. Now, the chapters are not all completely different from one another. Most of them still revolve around moving around the map, flipping switches, opening doors, closing doors, and either avoiding enemies or taking them on in combat. But that is fine, because the game adds variety in other ways. What makes the individual levels stand out are the extra conditions and objectives. Some levels change how enemies behave. Some make enemies move farther or climb better. Some temple missions have special effects that can help you. And then you also have different objectives before leaving the level, like searching, researching, crafting weapons, or dealing with other scenario requirements. Those details really spice up the gameplay and change what you need to prioritize. On top of that, the randomness creates a lot of variety. Sometimes you can have a fairly clean run through a level. Enemy spawns go very badly, and suddenly you have to really think about how to get out of the situation. Your weapons, outfits, abilities, and loader choices also contribute to that, which is another reason why I like that house rule for keeping crafted equipment so much. I also like the achievements in the campaign. They go very well with the individual chapters and give you another thing to aim for without adding too much overhead. They can push you to play a scenario in a slightly different way, and I think that's a lot of fun. Also, you unlock relics by fulfilling achievements that can also help you during later levels. The boss fights are probably the one part of the campaign that can feel a little bit more anticlimactic. At least in my experience, they are often less about various strategies and more about raw power. You build toward a strong weapon, maybe craft enough special dice, close the distance, and then try to unload as much as possible in 1 or 2 turns. One boss level took me around 10 to 15 minutes because I had enough materials to craft several special dice. These yellow ones down here. I closed the distance and defeated the boss very quickly. I think I only needed around 3 turns to finish that scenario. Of course, your experience may vary, and there are already house rules online that can make boss fights more difficult. But for me, boss fights were not always the most interesting part of the game. That said, I don't think this is a major problem. The regular chapters are where you use stealth, positioning, enemy movement, loader decisions, and all of your different tools. Boss fights feel more like a moment where the game says, alright, now you show me how much power you can build up and unleash. That can still be fun, just in a different way. These special dice also feel very powerful, maybe even overpowered if you have enough resources to craft several of them. You can create turns where you do a lot more than you normally could, which is pretty wild. But honestly, I don't dislike that. You can house rule it if you want, or limit yourself to crafting only a certain number of special dice, but I actually think it's quite fun that the game allows those big, explosive, and really fun turns. And there still is a natural pressure against simply farming resources forever. Time matters. The longer you take, the more event cards come out, the more enemies can spawn, and the faster you move through the deck, which can eventually lead to the Natla invasions, which make the level much harder. So yes, you can build up power, but the game does have ways to push back against you taking too long. Another mechanism I really like is what happens when Lara loses all her health during a campaign chapter. You don't simply restart or lose the whole campaign immediately. Instead, Lara heals back up to full health, but you permanently lose one of your Lara dice for the rest of the campaign. And if you lose all of those Lara dice, then you lose completely. I think that is a really good way of handling failure. It gives mistakes real consequences because having less dice is really punishing, but without creating too much maintenance or forcing you to replay everything right away. The enemy variety in the game is not enormous, I gotta say. You mainly have the Greek soldiers, or protectors as they're called, and then some wildlife like wolves and snakes. If you have the expansions, you also get dinosaurs, which is great. But even without them, I'm fine with the enemy variety, because more enemy types would also mean more miniatures, a bigger box, and more setup. And one of the things that I like about this game is how compact it stays. What the game really nails, though, is how the enemies behave. They are very simple to maintain and administer, which is really important. You can absolutely start with the standard enemy side while learning the game, because that keeps everything very streamlined and approachable. But once you know the game, I would strongly recommend using the advanced enemies. For me, this makes the game much better. Suddenly, the few enemy types you have feel much more varied because they behave differently, have different values, and gain special abilities. They also become less predictable because they don't always turn in the same direction, they move differently on different terrains, and you have to adapt to all of that. So if you play the game, I think it makes sense to learn with the standard enemies, but then move to the advanced side as soon as you feel comfortable with the game. That elevates the game quite a bit and makes the enemies much more interesting. Then there are the Croft Manor missions, which are an add-on and not part of the core game experience. I haven't played those yet, but I have taken a look at the missions 16 to 21, like all 6 of these missions, and they look very fun. They changed the game quite a bit, because for several missions you are playing inside Lara Croft's manor. Winston plays an important role, you may still remember him from the classic games, and the mission structure changes a little bit as well. I really like that idea. It immediately reminded me of the ending of Tomb Raider 2, where you think the game is over and then suddenly there's one more mission in the manor. This feels very close to that, and for fans of the classic Tomb Raider games, this is just a really cool nostalgic idea. Again, this is an add-on, but if you have the chance to get it, I would recommend taking a look at it, because it seems to put an even more interesting spin on a game that is already great. I've also looked at the island mode, which is the randomized campaign mode. I haven't played it myself yet, so take this with a grain of salt, but from reading through the rules and looking at how it works, this mode seems very interesting, and to my surprise, more complex than the regular campaign. From what I've seen, the designer has also mentioned online that island mode was actually designed first, and that at the beginning this was the only mode the game had. And that makes a lot of sense to me. The main campaign almost feels like an extended introduction to the game system. You play through those 15 chapters, you learn the mechanisms, you see the story, and you get to know what the game can do. And then island mode seems to be where the system really opens up. Island mode uses a thick stack of missions and randomized levels, so this actually might be the main meat of the game. Again, I haven't played it myself yet, so I don't want to overstate it, but it really looks like this is where the game can come alive long term. Combined with the base campaign, the challenges, the Croft Manor add-on, and the possibility of custom scenarios, there's a lot of game in here. If you want to get the game, I think the base game is enough in essence. But personally, I would recommend getting at least one add-on if you can, and maybe especially the dinosaurs, because they add just that bit more enemy variety that the game needs, in my opinion. I'm very happy that I got those, because they make the game feel a bit more varied. My biggest production nitpicks are the bag, beside the rulebook, and the deluxe dice. I don't think the deluxe dice actually came out especially well, at least in my copy. Maybe the other copies look different, but I personally prefer using the regular dice. None of these things are major issues, but they are small things that I would have liked to see improved. All in all, while Tomb Raider, the Crypt of Chronos is not a perfect game, it is an excellent solo game and an excellent solo experience. It gives you a proper campaign feeling without the huge overhead that many campaign games bring with them. Setup is quick, table space is manageable, the chapters play quickly, and the game is very easy to get back to the table. At the same time, it still gives you a lot of meaningful decisions through crafting, dice allocation, weapons, outfits, abilities, enemies, achievements, scenario objectives, and much more. I do have a few criticisms. The house rule for keeping crafted equipment makes the game better for me. The boss fights can feel a little less exciting than the regular chapters, and the small bag, large rulebook, and deluxe dice are production points I would have liked to see improved. But those issues do not take away from how much I enjoy this game. This is an absolute keeper for me, and honestly, it may be my favorite game I've gotten to know this year so far. I'm really happy that I backed, and this is why it receives my gold Sir Thecos Ace of Games award. This shouldn't come as a surprise, looking at how many positive things I had to say about the game. If you enjoy the Tomb Raider video game series, solo campaign games, scenario-based puzzles, or adventure games that give you meaningful choices without drowning you in rules and upkeep, this is absolutely one to look at. Well, that concludes my review of Tomb Raider, the Crypt of Chronos. Thank you so much for watching and for sticking to the very end of the video. As usual, my thanks goes out to all of you. A special shout out to my generous patrons. The biggest thanks go to Thecos for supporting me at the highest tier. I truly appreciate that. Seriously. You can all support me by watching, liking, and commenting on my videos, subscribing to my channel, supporting me on Patreon, and joining my Discord server to hang out with me and my amazing community. Alright, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the very next video or my Discord server. Take care everyone, stay safe, and cheers.